You ever feel like your entire life was a prank someone set up just to see if you'd break? Yeah, that's me. I'm John Harvey Kellogg, yeah, that Kellogg. The cornflakes guy. The health crusader. The let's make breakfast sanitized nut job, if you believe the stories. But honestly, this is less about my crusade against spicy foods and more about how my wife turned out to be a professional manipulator with a hobby in soul demolition. This is part vent, part therapy, and maybe, just maybe, something someone else can learn from. Because if you think inventing bland cereal is weird, just wait until you hear about Ella. Ella was radiant. That's how I used to describe her. She had this way of looking at you like you were the strange one, not her. I met her during a health lecture in Battle Creek. She stood up and asked if I recommended enemas for women as often as I did for men. It was a bold, smart-ass question, and I fell in love immediately. That was mistake number one. We married young. She liked my ideals, she said. Loved my purity, my vision, my disgust for carnal lust. She even claimed to be a believer in my biological living philosophy. No meat, no caffeine, no sex, no excitement. Really. We were supposed to be this united front against the rot of the modern world. But what I didn't realize was that Ella was all about excitement and secrets. The first few years were decent. We opened a sanitarium together. I focused on wellness, enemas, and inventing cereal that wouldn't inflame the senses. She ran the books and charmed the donors. But then, I started to notice little things. Odd things. Like the way she would laugh a little too hard when one of our wealthy male patients made a joke. Or the way she conveniently had a meeting every Thursday afternoon but always came back smelling like pipe smoke and lavender water. Still, I told myself she was loyal. She had to be. Who lies to a man who's trying to make America poop better? But oh boy, Reddit. The rabbit hole went way deeper than spoiled spreadsheets or an over-friendly bedside manner. All right, buckle up, because this is where things start to really go off the rails. So one Thursday afternoon, Ella's off at one of her donor luncheons, which usually meant she'd be gone for hours. I had a headache from testing a new formula, something with barley and oat milk, and went rummaging through the medicine cabinet looking for my peppermint oil. That's when I saw it. A velvet pouch, burgundy, drawstring, tucked behind a box of digestive clay tablets. Now, I'm not a paranoid guy. I mean, I basically spent my life telling people that constipation was the devil's handshake. But this pouch? It didn't belong. So naturally, I opened it. Inside were three things: a silver locket, a tiny bottle of perfume labeled Narrowly Nights, definitely not on any approved sanitarium scent list, and a folded note written in a handwriting I didn't recognize. It said, "Your touch cures more than any of his treatments ever could. Thursday can't come soon enough." I sat on the floor. Just sat there, holding this pouch like it was a ticking bomb. Because in a way, it was. My mind immediately did somersaults. Who was he? What was she doing on Thursdays? And why did it feel like my entire intestines were trying to evacuate at once? She came home that evening humming. I kid you not. Humming. Tossed her gloves on the table like she'd just come from buying tulips, not betraying her husband and business partner. "Everything all right, darling?" she asked, hanging up her coat. And for the first time in our marriage, I lied right back. I smiled and said, "Of course." But my stomach was turning in ways even I couldn't fix with psyllium husk. I started watching her more closely after that. Like, stalker-level close. The Thursday pattern continued. Same perfume. Same red gloves. Same glow. And always that pipe smoke smell lingering behind her like some ghost I couldn't shake. 1 week later, I followed her. Let me tell you, sneaking around your own sanitarium like a Victorian Scooby-Doo villain isn't something I ever thought I'd do. But there I was, pretending to examine wall insulation while keeping a bead on my wife like she was some escaped patient. She didn't leave the grounds. That surprised me at first. She walked through the east corridor like she always did on Thursdays, past the hydrotherapy rooms and into a section we had recently closed for maintenance. It was basically just a fancy excuse for me to stop funding the steam bath experiments after one too many lawsuits from overheated Chicago businessmen. But apparently, Ella found a use for it. I crept down the hall, stepped silent like a monk, and peeked through the little stained glass window in the door of room 217, the old herbal wrap room. Inside, I saw Ella. And him. He looked like a magician who got lost on the way to a seance. Slick back gray hair. Thin mustache. Silk cravat that screamed. I read Nietzsche but only for the power trip. And here's the kicker, he was massaging her feet while reading poetry out loud. Poetry. And not just any poetry. Sensual poetry. Rumi, or something like it. Something about thighs being temples or desire being eternal flames. I couldn't tell if I wanted to scream, cry, or throw a bottle of activated charcoal at the window. She was giggling. Giggling like she hadn't giggled with me in years. Her shoes were off, her hair was down, and she looked about 10 years younger. Meanwhile, I was crouched outside the door with cereal dust on my trousers and a heart collapsing like a flan in a cupboard. And then I heard it. She said his name. Basil. Basil. I mean, who names their side piece Basil? I stumbled backward into a mop bucket and barely caught myself before I crashed into a linen cart. It made a noise, though. Enough to startle them. I bolted down the hall and out through the garden doors before they could spot me. My chest was pounding like I just jogged up Mount Sinai. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, the velvet pouch sitting on my chest like a gravestone. She wasn't just lying, she was playing me. In my own damn temple of purity. With a cravat-wearing toe tickler named Basil. The next morning, I made her breakfast. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed the scene. I served it to her on the porch like we used to when we pretended to be in love. Whole grain porridge, a dash of flax, and of course, cornflakes, dry, unsweetened, morally upright cornflakes. Food for a pure soul, right? She was halfway through sprinkling wheat germ on her bowl when I looked up and said, flat as an autopsy table, so, how's Basil? She froze, spoon midair. Blinked once. Twice. Then smiled. Who? Basil. Silk cravat. Foot fetishist. Room 217. Thursdays. Smells like pipe smoke and reads Rumi while rubbing your toes like they owe him rent. Silence. Then she laughed. I mean full-bodied, melodic, eye-rolling laughter, like I'd just told her the pigeons were unionizing. Oh, John, you must be mistaken, she said, waving her hand. That wing's under repair. Nobody goes in there except a janitor with a limp and a grudge against towels. I just stared. My cereal sat in front of me like a bowl of judgment. She took a dainty bite of her porridge and continued. You work too hard, she said. All these enemas and meat bands are affecting your mind. Maybe you're repressing something. That last line hit me like a brick. Because she knew I couldn't, sleep with her. It was a vow I took, both moral and medical. Celibacy. Purity. My whole life's philosophy. But now, she was flipping the script and suggesting I was losing my grip because of it. So I laid it all out. The pouch. The perfume. The note. Her disappearances. The foot massage. She narrowed her eyes, real slow, like a cat preparing to pounce. John, she said, if you're snooping through my things and inventing fantasies about imaginary men and empty wings, maybe you need treatment. And just like that, I became the crazy one. Gaslight level. Expert. She walked off with a hum and a smile, like she hadn't just tried to Jedi mind trick me into doubting what I saw with my own two eyes. And part of me almost believed her. That's the scariest part. But then I found the ashtray. Let me tell you something, Reddit. I've preached for decades about health, purity, the dangers of vice. I've been mocked for it, sure, called uptight, called extreme, but never have I wavered. So imagine the absolute psychological earthquake when I found an ashtray. It was Thursday again. Ella had floated off in her usual lavender analyze cloud, leaving behind her faint trail of pipe smoke and false alibis. I had this gnawing itch in my brain, like an unbrushed molar. So I started snooping again. Not proud of it. But hey, at this point I was more detective than doctor. I was in the guest room. We rarely used it. But something felt off. The throw pillows were too arranged, the dust layer too absent for a room that should have been forgotten, like last year's grain orders. I lifted the corner of the rug, and something caught my eye, a tiny notch in the floorboard. Loose. I pried it up with a butter knife, and there it was, a ceramic ashtray, 2 cigarette butts still in it. One had bright red lipstick around the filter. Ella's exact shade, crimson purity, the irony of which could knock out a horse. And beside it, a leather journal. Now here's the kicker. It had my initials stamped on the front. JHK. I hadn't written in it. Not one page. I opened it, and boom, not my handwriting. It was wild and slanted, almost performative, like someone trying to sound deep in a creative writing class. The entries weren't dated, but they were explicit. I mean, Ella had written things in there that would make a Parisian courtesan blush. Pages of longing, of fantasy. Mentions of B, of Thursday, of tension that needed to be relieved. And again, a phrase. He'll never touch me, so someone has to. I just sat there for a full hour, holding this betrayal in my hands while our houseplants stared at me like judgmental ants. I dedicated my life to reforming America's insides, and here my wife was smoking, seducing, and scribbling erotica in a journal disguised as mine. I started to feel like I didn't even exist in my own life. Just some stiff mascot she paraded around while she lived a whole damn double life on the side. I didn't sleep again that night. But this time, it wasn't disbelief keeping me up. It was fury. So here we are. It's the 6th Thursday since this whole nightmare began unraveling like bad gauze on a wound, and I've upgraded from snooping husband to full-blown investigator with a personal vendetta. I mean, I had evidence now: lipstick, cigarettes, love letters to Basil, a velvet pouch of sin, and a journal where my wife practically wrote fanfiction about cheating on me. Still, she kept denying. Cool as a corpse. So I decided I needed irrefutable proof. Enter the Edison phonograph. A friend of mine in Battle Creek, one of the few still speaking to me after I banned pudding from the hospital menu, lent me a modified phonograph recorder. I tucked it into a cabinet drawer in the parlor and baited the trap. I set the stage, fire crackling, herbal tea on the table, cornflake tin on display like a holy relic. I called her in and said I wanted to talk openly. I asked her directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" She stared for a beat, then gave me this breathy, pitying laugh. "John," she said, "I've told you a dozen times. I'm not seeing Basil. He's just an old friend. We talk. You're the one who doesn't talk to me anymore." That part was real. We hadn't really talked in years. Not about anything personal, anyway. But that's when she slipped. I asked, "So you're saying nothing physical has happened?" She paused, and then she whispered, "God help me." She whispered, like it was an erotic bedtime secret. "It's only physical when the soul is empty. And my soul is still yours, John. Basil just fills the empty spaces." Click. The phonograph got it. All of it. That greasy little poem she dropped straight into my ears like acid. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, left the room, went to the garden, and threw up in a bed of medicinal mint. Even that smelled like him. Because here's the thing. She didn't confess with regret. She confessed with performance. Like she was auditioning for some sad, tragic role where I was the villain who drove her to cheat by being too moral. And somehow, she thought I'd feel bad for her. I locked the phonograph in my desk drawer that night. Because now I knew. She wasn't just lying. She was crafting a narrative. One where I was the controlling Puritan, and she was the oppressed wife who just wanted warmth, poetry, and a tongue massage from Basil. And I knew I wasn't done. I'm not a violent man, Reddit. I believe in clean bowels, clean living, and clean conflict resolution. But when I knocked on Basil's door that rainy Saturday, dripping wet, heart beating like a Kellogg drum, I was ready to do something unhygienic. The innkeeper didn't even flinch when I asked for Mr. Basil. Just pointed down the hall like he'd been expecting me. Room 217. Smelled like stale clothes, old money, and sex. I knocked once. He opened the door shirtless. This man, he was everything I wasn't. Bronze skin. Hair like a Botticelli painting. Muscles as if carved from deviled ham. He wore a silk robe open just enough to show chest hair that curled like Satan's handwriting. And around his neck? Ella's silk scarf. The one she told me she accidentally donated. "Ah," he said, smiling like he invented betrayal. "Dr. Kellogg. I wondered when you'd come. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I said, I know what's going on." He didn't flinch. Just stepped aside and said, "Come in. Let's talk like civilized men." His room was a mix of decadence and debauchery, half a bottle of absinthe, a gold ashtray shaped like a woman's mouth, poetry books with titles like Tongue of Fire and erotic breathwork for the enlightened male. This guy was less friend and more cult leader with a foot fetish and a philosophy minor. Then he dropped the bomb. "I have no intention of stealing your wife," he said, sipping something green. "I'm offering you something much more revolutionary." He slid a brochure across the table. His eyes sparkled with pity. It was titled, "Polyphysical Purity, Unlocking Love Without Ownership." I blinked. He went on, "You see, John, she's not unhappy. She's just expanding. And if you stop bottling yourself up like one of your enemas, you could expand too. I could teach you." I actually choked. This man, who'd been secretly rubbing my wife's feet and reading her roomie while she smoked in secret and moaned into silk sheets, this poet pervert, was trying to recruit me into his open relationship cult. Are you serious? I asked. Deadly, he said, locking eyes. You've been afraid of the body your whole life. But there's divinity in it. Even yours, John. Even yours. I left. Didn't say a word. Didn't punch him. Didn't burn his velvet curtains like I wanted. I walked out into the rain and let it wash over me like I'd just escaped a fever dream. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because Ella wasn't just cheating with him. She was falling into a whole worldview that I couldn't follow. Wouldn't follow. Ever. You ever opened something you shouldn't, not out of spite, but instinct? That's what happened with the drawer. Ella had this old oak chest of drawers she called her Lady Vault. I respected it for years. Never touched it. It was her space, her privacy. But by this point, trust was roadkill and I was the vulture circling overhead. So I opened it. Under layers of satin gloves, a bundle of pressed lavender, and an absurdly large collection of empty perfume vials, I found a small envelope, faded yellow, sealed with wax. It was marked simply, for Ella, in case he ever finds out. Yeah, that hit like a train full of laxatives. I sat down and stared at it for a good 10 minutes before I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. The kind of letter that should have come with a warning label. It wasn't from Basil. It was from Agnes McDowell, a name I hadn't heard in 20 years. Let me tell you about Agnes. She was a patient at my sanitarium back in the 1890s. Came in for nervous tension and compulsive unclean thoughts, which, back then, meant she liked books and orgasms. She was intelligent, sharp-tongued, and entirely uninterested in my lectures about masturbation being the root of mental illness. We had constant debates. Heated ones. She left after only a few weeks. I thought that was the end of it. Turns out it wasn't. The letter began. Dear Ella, if John ever uncovers the truth, I know you'll need this. You may be tempted to tell him I seduced you, that it was all me. But don't. You came to me first. You kissed me first. You begged me to stay in Battle Creek. You said you couldn't marry a man who wouldn't touch you, even if he was brilliant, even if he was righteous. I read those words over and over, my hands trembling. This letter wasn't just about infidelity. It was about a history, a hidden one. Ella hadn't just cheated with Basil. She'd loved someone before me, someone she'd hidden from me, someone I'd treated. A woman. And suddenly, everything snapped into place. The years of coldness, the stiffness in our affection, the way she winced when I talked about curing impulses. Maybe she married me to hide. Maybe she thought I could fix her. And maybe I thought I could too. I wasn't just betrayed. I was a prop in someone else's lifelong performance of being normal. And here's the gut punch. I didn't know whether to be angry or guilty. Had I stolen her future trying to sterilize her past? I folded the letter, placed it back in the drawer, and walked out of the room like I was made of smoke. I didn't know where Ella was that day. I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like the villain in my own story. She came home smelling like cinnamon and lilac cigarettes. That's how I knew she'd been with Basil again. He wore a cologne called Vesper, and she always came back with that scent embedded in her scarf and skin like sin itself. I didn't speak right away. I just handed her the letter. No yelling. No shaking. No guilt tripping her with a lecture about temperance or the evils of misplaced desire. I just handed it over like a surgeon offering a scalpel and watched her face. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blush. She read it slowly, lips moving like she was chewing each word. When she finished, she folded it neatly and set it on the table between us like it was a menu we'd both agreed to hate. Then she looked up and said, I wondered when you'd find that. That one sentence told me everything I didn't want to know. She knew this day would come. She planned for it. Like planting dynamite under a house and then going about your gardening until someone lights a match. I asked, quietly, was it true? Were you in love with Agnes? She stared at me for a long moment and then said, I think I was in love with what I could be around her. That hit harder than anything Basil ever did to me. Because in that moment, I realized I was never the person she wanted to be around. I was the person she thought she had to become to survive. Clean, controlled, frozen. I was the freezer. Agnes was the fire. You lied to me for 20 years, I said. I lied to myself longer, she snapped back. She started pacing. Said things like, you think you saved me with your cold baths and abstinence diets? You preach purity while letting me rot from the inside out. You never touched me, John. Not once in 20 years. You think I didn't notice? And here's where it twisted. Read it. This next part I'll never forget. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't hate that I was with Basil. You hate that he made me feel something you never did." That was the scalpel, right to the heart. Because she was right. I'd spent 2 decades treating marriage like a science experiment. Love, to me, was discipline. She wanted passion. I gave her charts. She wanted heat. I gave her cornflakes. And maybe, just maybe, she never stopped loving Agnes. Maybe I was just a social disguise. A safe harbor where she could pretend her desires were dead. But they weren't. And neither was mine. I just buried them in schedules, enemas, and edible sawdust. She left the room. I didn't stop her. I just stood there, staring at the letter. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to cure anything. I just wanted to feel something. If you're not familiar with my brother, Will, let me give you the crash course. He's the Kellogg who believed sugar wasn't the devil, sex wasn't a disease, and cornflakes should actually taste like something. He took my bland recipe, dumped a pound of sugar on it, and made millions. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. But on the Tuesday after Ella read the letter and left for the spiritual retreat, she conveniently forgot to mention we had a surprise visitor. I heard his laugh before I saw him. That rich, smug chuckle he always had when he knew he was about to drop some chaos into my order. I opened the door, and there he was, suitcase in one hand, bottle of whiskey in the other. "Brother John," he said, grinning. "Heard the Ice Queen melted. Thought you could use something stronger than a bran muffin." I didn't speak. Just stepped aside. He walked in like he owned the place, eyeing the sanitized furniture, the shelves of medical journals, the framed quotes about bowel regularity. "You know," he said, unscrewing the whiskey with one hand and pouring it into a teacup, "I always figured she'd snap one day. She married the man, not the gospel. People need touch, not theory." I sat down across from him, exhausted. He didn't waste time. "I've got news," he said, eyes gleaming. "The company's going public." I blinked. "What company?" He grinned wider. "Kellogg's, John. The real Kellogg's. My version. Sweet, indulgent, sinful cornflakes. People love them. And I figured, what the hell, maybe you'd want to sell your share before this whole sanctimonious empire of yours crumbles." I stared at him. "I don't have a share," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow. "Sure you do. You invented the damn flake. You just didn't capitalize on it." And that's when he dropped the second bomb. "You remember Clara Thompson?" Of course I remembered Clara. She was my secretary back when the flake was still in prototype. She took notes, typed letters, and, unbeknownst to me, apparently filed a patent in Will's name instead of mine. "She gave me your early formula," he said, sipping his drink. "Said you'd never want it going commercial. I made a few tweaks. Added honey, vanilla. Fun." I nearly dropped my teacup. My brother hadn't just stolen my wife's affection years ago. Yes, they kissed once. Let's not even go there right now. He'd stolen my legacy. The one thing I had. The cornflake. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the rain. My wife was in bed with a poet. My brother had taken my invention, and I was sitting in a perfectly clean house with a perfectly shattered life. Will finished his drink and said, "You know, John, maybe it's time you stop trying to fix everything. Maybe it's time to feel it. You ever hit rock bottom and find yourself in a room full of candlelight, Victorian wallpaper peeling, and a medium promising to connect with the beyond?" No. Well, neither did I, until Ella dragged me to one. After Will's visit, things got stranger. Ella came back, not from her spiritual retreat, but from something much darker. She looked pale, like someone who'd seen the inside of a coffin. She insisted we attend this seance she'd read about in some progressive journal. Said it was good for closure. I was skeptical but worn down, so we went. The medium was a little woman with wild gray hair, dressed like a cross between a fortune teller and a head nurse from the sanitarium. She called forth spirits, wove stories of forgiveness, and when it was my turn, she said, "You carry burdens not just of this life, but past lives intertwined. The cornflake inventor bears the weight of control and the loss of love." Ella squeezed my hand. I wanted to scream. The next day, a local paper mistakenly ran an obituary for me. Dead at 59. Cause of death, complications from excessive dedication to health reform. I didn't laugh. Ella read it aloud over breakfast, smirking. "Maybe they're right," she said. "Maybe you should let yourself die." I couldn't argue. That afternoon, I packed a small bag and left a note on the kitchen table. "I'm not dead, but maybe this marriage is. Find yourself, Ella." I hope you find what I never could give you. I walked out for the last time, or so I thought. Because 2 days later, I found her sitting on the porch, waiting. She looked broken. We talked for hours. No lies. No pretenses. Just two people trying to understand what they lost and what was left. She whispered, "I was never your enemy, John. Just a prisoner." And for the first time, I didn't want to fix her. I just wanted to set her free. After that night on the porch, something inside me cracked open. No fancy sanitarium cure. No bizarre diet. Just raw, messy life. I realized I'd been treating people like projects, not partners. Including myself. I started small. I swapped my bland breakfast for actual food. With flavor. I even dared to sprinkle a little sugar on my cornflakes. The horror, I know. I stopped preaching abstinence as if it were a magic bullet and tried to understand desire instead of suppressing it. I took walks without schedules, allowed myself to feel sadness without flushing it away with enemas or cold baths. Ella and I didn't fix the marriage overnight. Hell, we barely fixed ourselves. But for the first time, we talked honestly about fears, regrets, and why we both felt trapped. She admitted she'd lied, not just to me but to herself, and that the years of silence had been poison. I admitted I'd been more afraid of vulnerability than illness. Our relationship became something new, fragile, complicated, but real. Friends told me I was weak to let go of control. I told them I was strong enough to let go of illusion. You'd think after all this heartbreak and chaos, cornflakes would be the last thing on my mind. Nope. Turns out, those crispy little flakes saved me in the weirdest way possible. One afternoon, while wandering through Battle Creek's farmer's market, I stumbled on a little breakfast stand run by a young woman named May. She was hawking granola with a smile and a sparkle in her eye that reminded me of a less crazy version of Ella. We started talking about food, life, and the absurdity of trying to control everything. She confessed she'd grown up hating cornflakes, calling them the jail food of breakfast. But after trying her own spin with honey and nuts, she realized maybe there was hope for them yet. May invited me to collaborate. Not on sanitarium-approved cereal, but something delicious and imperfect. Working with her felt like therapy. We laughed, experimented, and I got a glimpse of the joy I'd been missing for decades. Then came the final twist. Ella showed up at the market one day, eyes wide, a smile breaking through years of bitterness. She wasn't there to fight or make amends. She wanted to buy a box of maize granola for herself. I realized then that life, like cornflakes, doesn't have to be sterile or strict to be good. Sometimes it's the messy, sweet, unexpected stuff that sticks. After all that chaos, betrayal, seances, and serial experiments, I found myself at a crossroads I never expected. Ella and I didn't magically patch things up like some romantic novel. We're not the same people we were when this all started. She's her own storm now, and I'm learning to sail uncharted waters without the safety net of control. We agreed to separate, but not with hatred or bitterness. More like two tired travelers deciding to take different paths, occasionally crossing, sharing stories, sometimes walking side by side. It's weird, honest, and uncomfortable, but it's real. I'm learning that relationships aren't about possession or perfection. They're about honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to let go when love changes shape. I'm building a new life, one where I'm not a mad doctor preaching purity or inventing cereal to control the chaos. I'm just John, a flawed man with a love-hate history with cornflakes and a deeper respect for the messy, unpredictable nature of human connection. Ella? She's out there living her truth, as am I. Neither perfect, neither saints, but maybe, just maybe, a little wiser. Here's what I've taken away from this entire whirlwind of cornflakes, lies, and crazy medicine. People aren't projects. You can't fix someone by controlling them or their habits. Real change comes from respect and honesty, not enemas or cold water. Trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. I wish I'd noticed Ella's lies sooner instead of burying myself in diets and routines. Betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't have to define you. Yeah, it stings like hell, but it can also teach you about your own needs, boundaries, and what love really means. Let yourself feel everything. Don't bottle it up like I did. Cry, scream, rage, whatever you need. Healing doesn't come from suppression. Sometimes love means letting go. Holding on to someone who's changed or who's hurting can hurt you more than losing them. And finally, life's messy. People are messy. Cornflakes don't have to be bland to be good. Sometimes, the best things come from mixing a little sweetness with the chaos. If you're going through something similar, know this: you're not alone. You deserve honesty, respect, and a love that feels like home, not a sanitarium. Thanks for reading my crazy story. And hey, if you ever want a recipe for not-so-boring cornflakes, hit me up. I'm learning. John.